What is something you know about your parents that you shouldn't know? As a teenager, I moved in with my mom after not living with her for most of my life and fighting to be a part of hers. One night I heard her and my stepdad talking about how the only reason they let me live there was for the tax credits and child support. My mom didn't marry my dad because she was in love with him. She chose him when the man she was in love with told her he couldn't marry a woman who already had another man's child. My dad had no problem with stepkids. She did eventually fall in love with him for what it's worth. My mother and stepfather were the direct cause of my little sister's death due to physical abuse. She had a shunt in her brain, and due to the impact of a few hard slaps to the face, it shifted and forced her to choke and die. My other little sister and I are the only ones that know. I've chatted with CPS and DCF, and without additional proof, there are doubts that anything can be done since her death was listed as natural causes and neither of us said anything at the time to any authority figures. It's been almost 5 years and I never stopped thinking about it. As a kid, I saw an old family tree that showed my mom had 3 babies, all different dads, whom she gave up for adoption before meeting my dad. I didn't say anything and she didn't admit it to me until about 10 years afterwards. My mother and father had a deal that my father would get a job, so my mom could finish college, and then my mom would get a job, so my dad could finish college. My father did his part, and when it was his time to go back to college, my mom and all her family humiliated him into going back to work. My brother and I are not supposed to know this, we were too young, but I know. My parents escaped from Iraq during the worst period of the Saddam regime. As a kid, you don't know what a war refugee is. I used to think my father worked at the welfare office. I found out years later that my father was going there for PTSD therapy. Having found his papers, I learned my father was tortured in prison for helping his students escape the country, and that the reason why he's always limping wasn't because of something genetic, but because they smashed his knee with a hammer, and locked him in a dark room for days with no medical help, destroying his career as an athlete and professor of physical fitness. My parents never ever talked about the stuff they went through. We grew up thinking we were a perfectly normal family. For the first 16 years of my life, I thought that my father had died in an accident. Turns out he just didn't care about me, and my mom was trying to make 4-year-old me feel better because she didn't want me to think it was my fault. It really messed with me when I found out at 16 that my biological father was still out there somewhere. As a young kid, I overheard my parents screaming in another room about what age I was when my dad left us. Mom said 3 months. Dad said 3 years. I didn't know he left at all. At least he came back? When I moved to Colorado with my mom, I convinced her to smoke some weed with me. She giggled a lot, laughed at cartoons with me, demanded Magic Shell with her ice cream, and then proceeded to tell me my father was a gay man who cheated on her multiple times with men during their marriage, including while she was pregnant with me. My father never went to college. He worked as a mechanic for many years to put food on the table for my mother, sister, and me. It wasn't until recently, when I was visiting his parents, my grandparents, and we were talking, until I realized how much stress he was going through when I was a kid. As a kid, I always just thought he was just an angry guy who would work all day, be pissed and yell at us for no reason. I didn't understand the long hours he was putting in or the stress it was putting him through. But especially now, as I enter the more serious full-time employment and adult life, I'm starting to appreciate him and his hard work, despite him never explicitly telling me. He's now got a very high position in a very large trucking company without a degree. I'm proud of him. My dad had a live-in girlfriend for 18 months before he divorced my mom. He was military and went on what he called an isolated tour overseas, where family wasn't allowed. When he got back to the States, I met some folks who lived in the same apartment building as him in Turkey. They told me they really liked my mom and it was a shame I couldn't go with them. Thing is, I was in the States with my mom. Met the girlfriend a few months later. She was the same age as my older sister. Needless to say, we didn't get along. They have a love-making schedule and I have to sleep through it. When my dad was in the Navy, he spent a short time in Australia. Long enough to find a local girl to enjoy her company a few times. After he shipped out, he got a letter from her saying she was pregnant, but not to worry because she was getting married to a local lad who would take care of her and the baby. My dad and stepmom are cousins. My grandmother used to be a hooker. I'm old. When the pill came out, women needed permission from their husbands before doctors would prescribe it. My mom was friends with a local family doctor and got him to prescribe it for her friends. Then they kept the pills at our house so their husbands wouldn't find out. Every morning they'd stop by for coffee, which was really just them coming to take the pill. My siblings and I wondered why so many neighbors stopped by every single day. We didn't find out until years later when one thanked us for never telling their husband. A few questions later and we knew what she meant. We immediately told our father, thinking he was going to be stunned. Nope. He was in on it the whole time. He co-signed mortgages and helped open bank accounts for divorced women they knew. Turns out our stay-at-home mom and workaholic dad were pretty badass and we had no idea. Now it's not something we shouldn't know, but there was a time we were sitting on a huge secret but had no idea. We could have blown up a lot of lives just talking about someone stopping by for coffee every day. My dad was part of a cartel and was investigated by the DEA. When my mom started to suddenly lose all this weight, she said, "Oh wow. I hope I'm not sick. I'm so skinny now." Everyone told her to go see a doctor, but she brushed it off every time. She also never ate anything. "Oh, I will eat later." I noticed she was never eating. She couldn't understand why I would go grocery shopping so much. I had to explain to her that normal people eat 2 to 3 meals a day and usually a snack in between. It was like telling a child something. The other day I was talking to my dad and said, "So is mom still making herself throw up?" He said, "Oh, I think she stopped." She has no idea that I know or that I tricked my dad into confessing her secret. That my mom gives great head. Knew that from my ex-boyfriend. That we stopped going to church when we were around 10 because my parents divorced. They kicked us out because it wasn't Christian. This was after 3 generations of attending every service, Bible camp, and function. My mom tried taking us to a few different churches, but they were not friendly to single mothers. We were kids and just didn't realize we hadn't been attending and had started getting into sports and activities instead. We were cut off from a lot of family and lifelong friends. My mother was superhero for going from a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids and a supportive community and family to a single working mom doing all she could. We also figured out why our new clothes always came home in garbage bags. Her coworkers would let her pick through the clothing they were getting rid of or donating if she dropped them off for them. My dad beat the hell out of my mom regularly. I found photos my grandma took of her when it happened in case she ever got the courage to report him. She never did. He's maintained this angelic persona with everyone at his work. All the women just love him and think he's a great guy. I understood my mom a lot better after seeing the photos. I stopped judging her so hard for always wanting to do big fun things. I think she just wanted to escape the reality of her life, even if it was just for a few hours. I am the executor of their will if they both die in an accident. Problem is, I'm the youngest of 5. October of 2021, my wife and I had to drive to a bar to pick them up. The waitress called me from my mom's phone and told me to pick them up or they are calling the cops. We got there, my dad was trying to fight everybody, my mom was just being a happy drunk, and off we went back to their place. On the way home they told me, well, they were drunk talking about it. Few months ago I unexpectedly got to know that my father anonymously donated significant amount of money to charity. Mostly as a direct help to children who needed expensive meds. I'm pretty sure nobody knows about this. None of our family, none of his friends, none of the families he helped. Besides him, it is just the girl who volunteers for charity and helped him to find families in need.